Hello everybody, welcome to today's Planet Zoo live stream. We have a very special stream, of course, with Robin from San Diego Zoo. Very excited to have her on. I think she has the most fascinating job I've ever heard of. And I know I say this a lot, but genuinely it is true. But I want to say hello to everybody in the chat. We have got so many people today. I hope you're all doing very well. I hope the audio is much better this stream. I just realized it's like super loud, so I'm about to turn it down. But yeah, I hope you're all doing well and taking care of yourselves. Obviously, it's a difficult time, and I'm very sorry that the streams aren't consistent, but we do them when we can. Let me just have a look at who's in the chat. We've got Joel, hello. We've got Sam, Adrian. We have Lorenzo DeFranco, of course. We've got Heather G. Thank you so much for modding. We've got Ram. We have Reginaldo, very fancy name. We've got David, Ria, we've got Amanda, Luke. We have loads of people. I hope you're all doing very well. Welcome back on the stream. Audio is great so far. Okay. Let's keep our fingers crossed this time. I will enjoy this special today. It'll be great. It'll be really good. Nicole says, can't wait to graduate and start a career as a real zookeeper. How exciting. Should I up the audio again? Was it better before? Let me know in the chat. Stan, the keyboard man. Dino Games, hello. I hope you're doing very well. All right. I'll just wait to hear if I should turn the audio back up again. Okay, I'll put it back up. Is it better now? Okay. I'm so worried about the audio, but okay, we should be good to go. I'm going to welcome Robin on to this stream. Hello, how are you?
Good morning, Shantae. I'm doing really well, thank you. Quite excited to hear all about Planet Zoo. I mean, it's a pretty amazing program, I must admit.
Yeah, I mean, the chat will vouch that they adore it, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, the Planzo fam are amazing builders, habitat builders. They're very talented, and I think they will very much enjoy this stream while you tell us a bit about what you get up to at San Diego Zoo, which actually does kick off my first question, which is, what is your role at the zoo?
Well, I'm actually an architect with the San Diego Zoo, and I've been with them for 32 years. And what we do is we take all of the information that the keepers and the curators and every single department gives us. We've got horticulture, we've got veterinary services, we've got so many different departments, interpretation, food service and retail, obviously. We take every piece of information that they give us and put it into hopefully what turns out to be an amazing environment and habitat for the animals so that the animals can thrive and the visitors have a wonderful time while they're there.
This is the best job I've ever heard of. Obviously I know that there's somebody that has to, design the habitat and whatnot, but I don't know why, but it just seemed like it just happened. I didn't realize that this was actually someone's job. So it's like so cool to get to speak to you. Also, before we go on to the next question, stick around everybody, because you can get to win one of these, this koala plushie. How cute is it? I forgot to say it at the start, but I was just looking at it and I was like, so cute. Okay, so the second question is, which I think a lot of people in the chat will really want to know, what are the key things that you aim to achieve when designing exhibits / habitats?
Well, really, one of the first and foremost things is to make sure that the animals are actually thriving in their environment. Every single animal is so different. I always say that we don't have animal Olympics, and so you don't really know every single parameter that the animals have. I mean, some of them jump high, some of them jump long, some of them obviously need water, but really, in order for the animals to thrive and for the visitors to enjoy the environment as well, the animals have to feel extremely comfortable, and they have to make sure, we have to make sure that they can live their best life possible. And in fact, quite often they live longer in zoos, and we hope that they have a wonderful life.
It's very interesting because, as I was saying before, I'm just like fascinated that this is your actual job. And it's interesting to hear what the key things are because as our players know, like enrichment items are, you know, like very important, and the actual design of the habitat, making sure that the animals, as you say, are thriving, are comfortable. So how did you actually become an expert in zoo habitat and exhibit design? Do you do both exhibit and habitat, or do you primarily focus on habitat?
Exhibit habitat buildings for people, as well as because you sometimes, or a lot of the times, you want to create an environment that represents the culture of the experience of the animal's environment as well. So you want to immerse the people in the environment of the animal, but also give them a little bit of an insight into how the people interact with the environment as well. So I think that's important. But for the animals to thrive, I think you've got to understand the physical requirements, obviously. You've got to understand what environment they live in. And I think that Planet Zoo does an amazing job of that, because you direct people, obviously, if they start to put the wrong elements inside an exhibit where an animal won't thrive. I think you give them very good clues as to what's going on there. So if an elephant needs to reach up to grab its food, and that's something that it would do normally, then it's wonderful that you would give it an environment where it needs to reach up to grab leaves off of the top of a tree, or if it's swimming in the water, that the water is deep enough for the elephant to actually feel very buoyant and can have a wonderful time taking its weight off of its feet and traveling for long distances in their exhibit, and manipulating objects with their trunks, which they're doing all the time. So you have to really think about every physical aspect, every attribute that that animal has, and listen quite intently to the experience that the curators and keepers may have brought back with them from the wild and their environments, and seeing how the animals have interacted with their environments as well.
So just for, I think, my own knowledge, how did you get into this job? Like, did you do a degree in, I assume, animal habitat architecture, if that's an actual degree, or did you do something and then you just managed to get into it? I have no idea the process of getting into this job.
Well, I was quite lucky. I graduated in Adelaide in South Australia, and I have a degree in architecture. I loved art. I loved biology. I enjoyed maths and science. And when I graduated, there was a downturn at the time in the building industry. And so when I had looked for information on my thesis, I had traveled around Australia to different zoos, and also I'd written overseas to a few other zoos. And somebody had put me in touch with Singapore Zoo, which had an amazing zoo over there. And when I graduated and there was no work left in Adelaide at that point in time, Singapore asked if I would like to come over there and work in an architectural company that worked with zoos. And so that's where I got my lucky break. And after I started working for the architectural company, the Singapore Zoo asked me if I would continue to work for them. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I wanted to continue to travel. And I came to see some people in San Diego, some friends of mine, and happened to drop by an architectural company that worked on the San Diego Zoo. And lo and behold, they asked if I would like to come on over and work at the zoo. And how can you turn that down?
Oh, so interesting. Krins, I hope I said this correctly. Krins says, so Robin does what we all dream of doing. We just do it in a game, which I think is basically how we're all feeling in the chat. But I'm just, oh yeah, everyone's super excited for this koala plush. Saber says, hello everybody, welcome. We're seeing a few more people, hello. Dolphin Games, we've got Dutch Lion, hope you're all doing well. I do actually have videos to share, but I'm quite worried that the audio will cut out, but I think it's fine. It's just been a long time since we did these streams consistently. Another question I have is, so how do you make the habitats and the exhibits stimulating for the animals?
Well, again, it definitely depends on the animal's attributes. You have to really stretch their limits and give them challenges. So the other thing that you can actually do, and I have not seen this on Planet Zoo, but I'm sure that some people have definitely done that, is you can create habitats that are obviously multi-species, but also moving animals from one habitat into the next and into the next and rotate habitats. So when an animal comes into a habitat where another animal has previously been, that animal has left a lot of different scents and a lot of different cues in the environment that another animal has been in there. And so that's generally extremely stimulating for them. We have a habitat at the San Diego Zoo that has orangs and also some siamangs in it. And so they do interact together quite often. And having another species in the same exhibit is extremely stimulating for the animals, especially if they can interact on some different level. So that's quite challenging at times because the barriers for two different animals or the perimeter of their environment needs to be very different sometimes for each animal. And trying to disguise the perimeters of the environment is particularly challenging, but also by giving the animals different levels that the animals can be at, not just on grade, but also a lot higher, so that they can see over the edges of any of the habitat, and they might be able to get long distances and see and smell different things. All of those, the touch, the tactile, the visual, the auditory. We have sounds that we incorporate in their environment, not sounds that will be detrimental or distress them, but sounds. In one case where we introduced sounds in a bird aviary, the birds actually started to breed when they hadn't in many, many years prior to that. So in that case, it was that auditory sound that stimulated their breeding, which was fantastic.
Oh, that's so interesting. I like the fact that obviously you think of like the materials, the sounds and everything. That's so fascinating. Vincent in the chat says, do you have any tips on how to get into this career path?
That's really interesting. The cool thing about it is that we as an architect working on zoo design, we don't just work on our own, obviously, because by the time we get a set of drawings together that describes the entire environment, we work with civil engineers, with landscape architects, with other architects, with water filtration experts, so that's life support systems, with electrical engineers. There's so many different fields that need to come together, and really what I do actually is choreograph all of those different fields into an environment that's so stimulating for both the visitors and the animals, and try to also educate people as well. So it's very important to do all of that and interact with all of those different fields. And I think that you could probably get into any one of those fields and be brought into zoo design.
So I'm showing a video of the Australia habitat. Am I right to say that you had a part in designing this?
Yes, certainly did. The Australian habitat was extremely interesting and a lot of fun for me, because what would happen is I would go back and see my father probably towards the end of his life. I was going about every 6 months, but every time I would go back there, I would take Dad on some trips in the countryside. And this Australian habitat is really what you would encounter when you were driving along the countryside, and the different sights, the sounds, the animals, even road signs, and tumbled down houses and wool sheds in the distance, and the eroded riverbanks, all of that, the windmills, the rolling hills, everything we tried to bring in, even the sights and sound, again, the kookaburras and the magpies in the morning, all of that we tried to incorporate in this exhibit, just so that you didn't have to go to Australia if you didn't want to. You could experience by walking through the San Diego Zoo Safari Park's habitat.
It's such a beautiful habitat as well. There are a lot of compliments in the chat. Everyone was like, this is so pretty, this is amazing. So this is another question that's off script, but I'm very interested to know. So in terms of actually creating a habitat, what is the process behind it? Do you go through like, what's the word, like various blueprints and stuff? Does it go through like loads and loads of iterations, or does everyone come together and just try and, you know, do it in one go? I don't understand the process.
No, it actually takes quite a long time, probably over a year or 2 years sometimes to get the schematics, design development, construction drawings going. You go through, initially you start with a master plan for the entire zoo, and then you have a mini master plan for the area that you want to develop. And then from there you have some conceptual drawings where you lay out all of the information on the animals, the sizes of the different environments and habitats that they need to have for the different animals, and how you would walk through the space, how you would access the space from vehicle services points of view, where you might want visitors to stop to have a rest or to get a snack, as people in Planet Zoo do. So that's all in the conceptual phase, and then you take that and you go to your consultants and you want them to start putting in more details, and you have a lot of meetings with all your consultants, and you get to a certain level where everyone is comfortable with it. You go back and you talk to all of the keepers, curators, all the different departments at the zoo. You show them the conceptual plans. They agree with that. You get a rough budget on it. And then you go to the next step, which is schematics, where you refine it further with all the same people. Then you go to design development. Then you go to construction documents with permits. And then you go to the city and you have to get the permits. And then you can finally start to build it.
That is a process. I don't know if anyone in the chat was expecting that, but I mean, it sounds to me like we're very lucky in Planet Zoo that we can just build immediately. That is such a process. I can't believe it. Well, I mean, I can understand why it takes that long. But as Nith just said, imagine building habitats in Planet Zoo that way. So much planning. We would need faster game pacing. I completely agree. Alex has a great question. What is your favorite animal?
Oh my goodness, there's quite a few of them. My favorite bird would be a shoebill from Africa. They're quite prehistoric looking, and I think my favorite mammal, actually, I have to say at the moment, since we just designed the platypus habitat, I would say it's probably the platypus. It's that habitat was one of the most complicated habitats that we have ever had to design. It was quite spectacular for a tiny little creature. The platypus's body is probably only about 12 inches long, and then its bill is probably about another 5 inches on one side, and the tail is probably about another 7 inches on the other. It's not a very big animal at all, and yet it causes quite a few design dilemmas.
Oh, I'm so interested to hear about these dilemmas. I would just think, you know, I mean, in Planet Zoo, in my building, I build very basic habitats. I'm nowhere near the master builders I know in the chat. So, like, I can't even imagine the not the hassle, but just the process of going through it. It's just, I mean, this role is very fascinating. As I said, it didn't even occur to me that people actually have this job. So it just sounds super interesting. We did have a question I thought was quite interesting. Sam says, so how do you actually get the animals into the habitats?
That's a really good question. They don't come in, well, I guess they do come in obviously some type of container, but not quite the little small boxes that I've seen in Planet Zoo. But we do have to allow for service roads to the back of every bedroom or area out the back, behind the scenes area. And the trucks pull up. In the case of the platypus, they were flown from Australia, and they had to come in containers that had dry ice on the bottom of their containers, because they had to be kept at a certain temperature, flying the 16 hours from Australia to the US and then traveling on a truck to get here. And then once the containers were in the habitat, if you can handle the animal, then and they're small enough, then you can take them from that that enclosure into their habitat. If they're larger, like polar bears, then you have to have a forklift that can get the truck into the back area of their bedrooms and bring that large crate and actually put it in up against their bedroom and secure it, and then open a sliding door so that the polar bear can get inside without harming anybody. Because even though they know their trainers, or actually they know their animal care specialists, I should say, all of these years they've been working with them, they'd probably turn around and just as soon eat them, I think. So
Yeah.
polar bears can be very dangerous animals, and the way that you transport them is very, very carefully.
I think everyone was quite shocked to hear the process, especially the fact that, as you were saying, like you have to be cautious of the environment that the animal's from. So you'd have to pack ice into their when they're moving around and things like that. I think we have it very lucky in Planet Zoo. I'm just going to say, chat, I think we have it very lucky. Another question is, so how do you design the habitats/exhibits that are safe and comfortable for the animals, but also keep the visitors in mind? So, like they're able to see the animals, but also the animals aren't stressed out by seeing them a lot, that sort of thing.
That's actually a really interesting question. With the tiger habitat, what we had to do was make sure that the tigers felt comfortable, that tigers don't really like to see each other in the wild unless they're coming together and mating, the Sumatran tigers. And so we had one habitat opposite another habitat so that the visitors could feel like they were walking literally through the tiger habitat. And we had to design the exhibit so that there was a lot of landscape barriers in between one habitat and the other, so that the tigers could not see each other from one area to the other. Or if a tiger wanted to stay away from the view of the public in some instance, or another tiger, that they could do that, and they could have their safe distance and feel very comfortable. Tigers can jump quite high, and so all of the barriers around the habitat have to be at least 16 feet high. We never go with the minimum. We always go higher than that. And we use a mesh that's called an Invisimesh that is black and anodized. And so when the perimeter is up and you've got a lot of landscape around it, it actually disappears in the shade. And so it gives you the appearance that there almost is no barrier in between you and the tiger. And the other thing that we do to keep people safe, because we have to keep them safe from themselves sometimes.
Yeah.
They don't always use the most common sense.
Yeah.
We have some handrails that actually angle in towards the public with some cables, so that should anybody try to get over the handrails, they'd kind of get tangled up in the cables, and it would not be very comfortable. So those handrails actually disappear in the landscape because they're angled and the plants are planted underneath them, and they grow up through the handrails. But they keep the public back from the tiger exhibit, and we keep the public back at least 2 arms distance and a little bit more, so that they can't get their hands through any perimeter barrier there.
Free Range has a very good question, and they've asked, how do you decide what materials are best to use for a habitat depending on the environment? So, for example, are there materials that keep polar bears cool that wouldn't work in another habitat?
That's an interesting question too. What we did with the polar bears is we had a lot of obviously water, but we also had a big chiller that kept the water temperature quite cold for them. In some tiger habitats, we need to put heating rocks in the habitat so that they have areas where they might want to stay warm. In the lion habitat, we had some rocks on the outside of the area that had fans blowing on them, and so it would keep the lions cool and attract them to areas where the public might be. So the temperatures, we definitely take that into account, and in some instances, we haven't had to cool down some of the rocks, but that wouldn't be a bad thing to do either. Misting is also a great thing for both the public and for the animals.
Sam has asked, how do you know if an enclosure is too small or big for an animal?
Well, it would be terrible to have any stereotypic behavior for an animal, and we do have a lot of regulations that there are papers that are written, and as I say, regulations on the size of each animal habitat for each different species, but we far exceed that. We would much rather have the exhibit be an awful lot larger so that the animal can roam and feel very comfortable. Viewing distance is something that we take into account so that we don't, obviously you don't want the animal to hide too much, but at the same time, for example, in a gorilla exhibit where we wanted the animals to feel extremely comfortable, we did have an area that dipped down at the back so that the animals could hide. So at times, if animals do need to get away from the public view, we want them to do that. We want them to feel very, very comfortable and not stressed out in any way, shape, or form. We want them to feel very relaxed in their environment so they can, as I said, they can thrive, and they can any behavior that they would like to do that they could carry out in that environment. And that makes the visitors a lot happier too when they can see that the animals are relaxed in their environment.
So am I right to say as well that you also had a hand in designing the tiger trail?
Yes, at the safari park, that's correct.
Yes, so we were just showing a video of that. We have some more footage of that later. But Kelleran asks, are there any artists on your habitat design team, or are they just like engineers, caretakers, etc.?
We do have people that work with us, illustrators that work with us, because when we build habitats and environments for animals, new experiences for the public, all of our exhibits and habitats are paid for by donations, and we have some wonderful donors. And in order to excite the donors and get them on board with the conservation programs that we have, what we do is we create illustrations of each one of the areas of the habitats that we're designing. And so our development department can go out and show the donors all the different aspects and viewing areas and incredibly interactive places that we might have designed for the visitors. And that way they know exactly what might be built and what they might be giving their money for, as well as to support all of the animals in their natural habitats as well.
We have another question, but I just want to say you are all nailing it with the questions today. These questions are so good. RCL says, do you import sand, ground, plants and rocks that are from the animal's wild habitat to create the zoo habitat, or do you stick with local materials?
No, wherever we can. That's a great question. Wherever we can, we definitely bring in the plants that the animals would feel comfortable with. Browse from whatever plants that they might like to pick berries from or take leaves from trees or bushes. I think that's incredibly important. We also, the sand, perhaps not so much. All of the rock, we recreate some of the rock in their environments. We have subcontractors that specialize obviously in rock design and rock creation. I think it's very important to have different substrates though, and so it's true that in elephant exhibits we bring in even to the point of a baseball diamond type of sand that the elephants seem to enjoy. And so we try to create a lot of different substrates for them so that they can rub up against those substrates or mimic anything that we have in the wild that they might come across. So that's an excellent suggestion. Sometimes we do have to use plants or trees that might mimic what they have in the wild because those plants may be too difficult to grow in our environment. However, in San Diego, we're extremely lucky in having a very temperate climate here. So most of the plants, we're lucky enough to be able to replicate or use the exact plants that they would have in their environment.
It was very toasty in San Diego when we went to visit last year. I was most unprepared, but the fauna and whatnot around is absolutely beautiful. Like all the like cacti and things. I was like, wow, I wish I could grow this in my flat in Cambridge, UK, where it rains constantly. But alas, no, I can't do that. Crins asks, what has been the most difficult / challenging animal to design a habitat for, and what habitat are you most proud that you've helped to create?
Gosh, I think that the two habitats that were quite difficult to create would have been the behind-the-scenes polar bear area, because they are such dangerous animals, and so that was technically quite difficult with operation of gates and making sure that everybody would be safe. But also, as I alluded to earlier, the platypus exhibit was quite challenging because the platypus water environment and the viewing of the platypus under the water and the different levels of water, plus having the animals come out from those levels of water back into their nest boxes or nesting areas behind the scenes. There's a behind the scenes natural nesting habitat that they go back into, but there are also a lot of other boxes back in there, and because they dig tunnels in their natural environment and they dig them quite deep into the banks, we had to provide these tunnels back into their nest boxes behind the scenes. And that was quite a challenge because of all the different water levels and not wanting the water to come back into the environment behind the scenes when we didn't want it back there. It was quite a challenge to choreograph all the different levels of tunnels. It's that was quite difficult.
God, so interesting. I can't imagine an animal flooding their own habitat. I'd be fuming.
The animals actually, when they dig their burrows in the wild, they dig them through roots of trees, and so I think that as they go through them, they actually squeegee their fur dry when they get back to their nests, and so we have to mimic squeegees in the tunnels for the platypus. It's very interesting. The other thing is feeding the platypus when they're in the habitat, because the male platypus has a poisonous spur on its back leg, and the keepers cannot go in with that particular platypus, the male, and getting the food into the habitat during the day required putting in some removable chutes so that they could put some yabbies or worms or larvae into the habitat during the day to continue to feed the platypus. They're extremely active in their environments.
They sound like a hassle.
They are.
They sound...
As well as it being a nocturnal exhibit as well, on top of everything else.
Oh, so interesting. Corinne says, that's amazing, but especially in capital letters. So they must be raving. Siba says, incredible. Another question I have is, are there any habitat / exhibit items that you believe are key to like a certain animal's well-being, such as like tall feeders for giraffes?
Oh, definitely tall feeders for giraffes. And giraffes, when they drink, they spread their legs very wide, and they obviously put their head down into the water. So having a nice water body where they can feel comfortable on the bank and feel good enough purchase so that they can scoop down with their neck and drink the water out. The other critical thing for the environment is to allow the animals to choose their own habitat. So as somebody was alluding to earlier, the climate that they want to be in. Do they want to be in an area where it's misty and cool, or do they want to be in a warmer area? And do they want to be in an area where there's some shade and leaves? Is there a soft space for them to lie down on? Is there an environment where they want to have a lot of rock that they might want to lean up against? All of these different types of environments in the same habitat or same area it's extremely important for the animals, whether they want to be high or low, that they can choose where they want to go and how they want to regulate the temperature for themselves, so that we don't always say this is how they should be, that the animals get to choose just as they would in the wild. And that's extremely important to us. So the more texture, the more variety that you can give an animal, the more it will thrive, the more that the people, our visitors, will enjoy the habitat along with them, I think.
I hope you're all listening in the chat. That's some very interesting insight, like having the different levels and whatnot. Just the fact that the animals have a lot of choice, I think, is something great to keep in mind when you're building your habitats in the game. Just make sure you give your animals a lot of opportunities and chances to do what they would like to do, basically. I'm just looking at the chat.
I think, sorry, one of the other things I think as well is that if the public can be in the same environment as you're providing for the animals, that's incredibly important too, because then the public is actually part of the habitat, and you can also provide some incredible active experiences for the public to encounter in that environment as they might in the wild if they were walking through there. So perhaps they have to walk over some rocks, or perhaps they have to go through a net and a small tunnel in order to get to the other side of a particular area. And I think that when the visitors are active and moving through the environment, then they get a much more interesting perspective, and what they're experiencing will stay with them a lot longer, and they'll be more involved in what you want to create.
This is so super interesting. Like rocks and things, just to keep those in mind when you're building your habitats. It's fascinating. We have a question from Kelleran who says, you mentioned habitat feeders. Do your herbivores get most of their food from the feeders or through like roaming through their habitat?
That's another good question. We have to balance it, because if they do eat all of the plants in their exhibit, then that would make it a very boring exhibit. So we try to incorporate the browse feeders, where they would get the most delicious food that they could possibly want, and therefore make sure that they fill up sufficiently on that, as well as continue around the exhibit and browse on the plants that are in the exhibit. But we certainly want to try and maintain a healthy, shaded environment for the animals, and that they don't eat everything in their habitats. So positioning the feeders in interesting spots for the animals and also interesting places for the public is very important. And it might also be the case that you have some feeders that distribute food out through the exhibit, so that the animals go and find that food and wander through the exhibit during the day. So one particular feeder may show up at a certain time, and another particular feeder may show up a different time in a different place. So that could also enhance the animals' experience.
Oh, super interesting. Another question I have for you. I keep saying another question. This is a discussion. So it makes sense. I have a lot of questions. But another question I have is, how do you cater for nocturnal animals?
Very good question. Nocturnal habitats, that actually is, as somebody else suggested earlier, one of the most difficult habitats to build. Quite often, if you have only one animal in a nocturnal area, the experience is so short that the human's eye doesn't get a chance to adapt to that dark area. And so you have to create an experience that the visitor has on the way into the nocturnal experience, to where it doesn't go from just light to dark, so that it takes about 5 to 7 minutes for a visitor's eyes to adjust to the dark. And it's only then, at that time, that the visitor will actually be able to see the animal clearly. So what we did with the platypus habitat, we want it to be more of a dawn-dusk experience, so it wasn't totally 100% dark. and we had to play with the rock and fencing that we had at the back of the exhibit viewing area, so that we could darken it and darken it and darken it gradually until we figured out that there was enough of a barrier to stop the natural light coming in, but there was still enough light for the public to negotiate coming into the experience and then seeing the animals. We do have some light specific light that we have in the platypus area that is of all different colors, and it can be controlled, and we can have different hues at different times of the day, darken it, lighten it, so that it could even mimic the seasons. And we have live plants in the exhibit, and when the animals go into their bedrooms or back area at night, the live plants have to have a full spectrum, huge amount of light to grow properly when it's nighttime in our time, and trying to make it daytime for the plants as well. So that, there's there's a lot that goes on into a nocturnal habitat. In the ponds, we do also have a little bit of light, so that when you're in a dark environment and you have that tiny little bit of light in the water environment, it reflects through the ponds and allows the animals to be seen a little bit better as well.
Now we know why you need all those people to help design a habitat. It's all coming together.
Exactly.
We were just showing the tiger trail video, and everyone is absolutely enraptured by the fact that you can play tug of war with the tigers. Everyone is getting super excited in the chat. That is, I would absolutely love to do that. So definitely something to keep in mind on my next visit to the States. So as you just said with nocturnal animals, obviously there's a lot that goes into it. Is there a similar sort of process to caring for animals that require any special treatment?
Yes, there is. Some of our animals, I think you've heard in other sessions from keepers and curators, they may have certain ailments like diabetes, just like visitors do.
Yeah.
And in order to make sure that the animals participate in their care, there are some areas where the animals get to interact with the keepers, and they will come up and they will willingly hold their arms out so that they could have some blood tests taken. That also happens with the elephant area behind the scenes, and even on public view, that the elephants come up and they have an interaction area where their animal care specialist can take care of doing some nail filing for the elephant's feet. And you can imagine that if you go to a nail parlor to get your nails done and you have to put your hand onto the table and have your nails looked after, with an elephant you've got to provide that type of podium that the elephant can put his foot up there and have his nails or her nails done. So you have to provide all of those behind the scenes or in front of the guests, interactive areas where the animals and the animal care specialists can interact together in a very collaborative way to take care of any needs that they may have.
We did have the privilege of seeing, when we visited last year, we did have the privilege of seeing one of the elephants get a pedicure.
Yes.
It was incredible. They're so well, like they know so well, like they've been trained, and obviously they do have the choice. So when they come over and the elephant just put its foot up, and then away we went with the pedicure. It was really fun to watch and just be a part of. So I can imagine doing that at various different habitats, such as just experiences and interactions, is a grand time. Arciel says, are there any species that you would dream to design a habitat for with a team?
Oh gosh, that's an awfully interesting question. Actually, so we have an Asian experience that we are designing at the moment. It's behind, we're designing an elephant habitat right now up at the safari park, but after that we have an Asian experience where the different animals that are included in that area, clouded leopards and babirusa, which are some amazingly endangered pigs that need a lot of help. They look very ugly, I guess, but to some people they look fantastic. They need a lot of help in their environment, and what we're trying to do, there's a marsh experience. We have a little boat pull where people can get into a raft and pull themselves across a marsh where they could see some storks and some little deer or muntjac. And you can see people going on a behind-the-scenes tour that would be climbing up on a rock ledge, with being guided along and being hooked into the rock ledge, just like people might experience Asia if they were going on a trek out in Asia. We've got a tunnel where people walk through, and they come out and they see some some Asian dogs, and they actually walk through a clouded leopard habitat, and the visitors are in a harp wire walkway where they would walk through that, and the clouded leopards can roam around the visitors and feel free to walk around. So it's more the visitors are walking on a bridge through that habitat. There's a lot of interactive elements that we are putting together in that experience, where the public can choose to be a lot more active in the environment. And as I say, I think that is wonderful, because they learn a lot about the animal's habitat, and I think then they become a lot more in tune with wanting to protect those species and the species habitat in the wild.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's all about education and getting to experience the animal kind of just living their life, and getting to see what they get up to. I think it does really help when it comes to building a habitat, I guess, in Planet Zoo. I don't think anyone in the chat has your job, so I think just in Planet Zoo. But Krins asks, how much design goes into keeping the habitats clean, such as like general cleanliness of the animals?
There's a lot of thought that goes into making the back areas as easy to clean, but also comfortable environments for the animals. So we have some drains at the back of some of the bedrooms where the keepers can hose everything to the back through a larger drain, and it comes all the way down to the keeper area in the front, or the animal care area in the front, so that they can just empty one catch basin, if you will, so that all the debris goes down to the front. And so the slopes of the floors are important, that they stay that they are cleaned very easily, but then they also dry out very quickly, so that they aren't wet or slippery for the animals. There's a lot of behind the scenes enrichment that goes on with the bedding, and even spraying perfume around the different bedding and habitats that the animals have, even behind the scenes. And that bedding is changed on a regular basis. So being able to pull that bedding out, whether it's straw, hay, browse, even cardboard boxes. The tigers love to play in and hide in cardboard boxes back behind the scenes, but you've got to get that into the to the habitats and back out of the behind the scenes areas. So keeping the keepers safe, but also making sure that they can have access to those areas. It's very important, and there's a lot of thought that goes into how the animals move through that back space, as well as how the animal care specialists move through that space as well.
Well, that's super interesting, but we are coming up to the last 10 minutes of the stream, so I do want to let you know that you can win this koala plushie. Basically, if you would like to win, please put !koala in the chat, and I'll let that run for a few minutes while we continue asking Robin some questions, and then I will eventually pick the winner close to the end of the stream. I'm just looking at the chat, seeing if there are any questions. Another one I want to ask is, so we've talked about animals that are difficult to design habitats for, but are there any that are like really easy, like a very quick job when you did it? You were like, this is the easiest job I've ever had in my life.
Well, I think bird habitats, because you have to deal with mesh with the enclosures. You can sometimes put them in glass in a darkened with a glass barrier, or even no barrier in a nocturnal area nocturnal where the public is dark and the birds are in a lighter area. They stay in the light. They don't like to go out into the dark. But really, I think if you can design a huge aviary where all the birds can fly around, and you've got some enormous plants that you can put in there, and amazing walkways that animals can walk on, that would be the easiest as far as the barriers go. But yeah, I think that birds in that case would be probably the easiest.
I would have thought they were the most difficult. I could just imagine that they're such like free spirits. You know, they get to travel so much, they migrate a lot. But I wouldn't have said. I mean, I'm not an expert like you, but I wouldn't have said that it was a bird. But saying that, when we visited, I say this in every stream because it was one of the best experiences I ever had. But when we visited San Diego Safari Park, there's like a parrot. I think the name is Samson, that sits like right at the front and just chills on like a little perch and waves at us. And me and Bo, another CM that used to work at Frontier, she went to the experience with us. We were having the best time. Like Samson was just sitting there chilling, waving. We were like clapping at him, and then he would wave at us. Oh my God, it was the best. That for me made the whole trip. Not that it wasn't 10 out of 10, but it made it like 100 out of 10. I was like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. A bird is waving at me. So it's really interesting.
Public.
I can imagine that he just absolutely sits there like all day long, doesn't go anywhere, just has the best time waving. I'm just having a look at the chat. Vincent asks, does Sandy... Oh, yes, so please, go on.
No, I was just going to say the other thing. I don't know how much people pay attention to it, but night lighting is incredibly important, and pathway lighting. We use moon lighting wherever we can, so the lights come out from trees, so it dapples the light on the pathway, and it doesn't put any harsh light out on the pathways. So that's something I don't know whether your players have thought about.
As a top tip, everyone, lighting. I mean, I think they're obsessed with lighting. We've had a lot of people request different lights in Planet Zoo, so I think they're on that one. Vincent has a question. I'm not sure if this is your area of expertise, but I'll ask it anyway. Does the San Diego Zoo release animals back into the wild? And if so, does the interaction between the keepers and the animals affect their ability to look after them?
That's another good question. Yes, we've had some wonderful success, particularly with condors in the wild. Or they were down to, I think, the last 27 condors that were left in the wild. And there was a very incredible collaborative effort to collect those 27 birds that were left in the wild and bring them in. And we were able to take the eggs once the eggs had hatched. Before the eggs had hatched. When you take an egg from the bird, then they will lay another one. And so we were able to hatch the egg that we took from an incubator. But while we did that, the animal care specialist raising that chick would the chick could not even hear any outside noises that were not natural. So the animal care specialists were in a dark area. The chicks would not see the animal care specialist, and they would raise the chicks with a condor puppet head, so that the condor would not become imprinted on any humans, that they would become imprinted on the mother like they should when it looked like the mother. And we've successfully been able to release condors back out into the wild. And the exact number I'm not sure of, but it's over, I think, 170 or so condors that are now flying around back in the wild at the moment. We've had similar experiences with oryx over in Saudi Arabia, and scimitar horned oryx, and quite a number of other different species. But the one thing that we have to make sure is that the environment is still very healthy in order to support the animals when they are released.
There was a question that does link to this that I thought was a really good one, but because everyone is typing koala for this plushie, I've lost it. I'm just having a scroll. Christian asks, when an animal's habitat is different to the area where it will be released, how do they adapt to their new home?
I think what we try to do always is to introduce all of the elements that the animal might encounter in the wild, in the habitat where they're being prepared to be released. And so vice versa, it was very important when we were doing the Walkabout project that a year prior to the project, we brought in the kangaroos and the wallabies that were going to be in the same habitat as the public walking through, and we gave them an introduction to all the different materials that they would be encountering in the habitat that they would be in a year in advance so that they could become used to that. And so when the animals are going to be released, they need to know what obstacles or what environment they're going to encounter and learn about that environment. And so that is extremely important. And sometimes you have to not necessarily release the parent, but release the offspring after they've gotten used to that environment back into the wild, if that makes sense.
It does. That's really interesting. So this is my final question for today's stream. You've been absolutely fantastic. If you could give 3 top tips to the Planet Zoo community about creating their habitats, what would your 3 top tips be?
I think that when you're creating a habitat for visitors and the best habitat that you can for the animal to thrive, I think that you have to have your story in mind. What are you trying to create? What story are you trying to tell? What environment are you trying to produce so that the animal can feel the best it possibly can, and it can use the environment to its fullest, and that way the visitor will be involved in it too. And so you try to engage the visitors in the environment, and don't just provide the basics, but provide everything that you can possibly think of that would be natural in that animal's environment so that it can thrive. And then also including cultural clues, I think, for the humans to get them thinking about how they interact with the environment around them and how different cultures interact with the environment around them as well. And I guess the last one, which is obviously what you already do, is to have a lot of fun.
I mean, I hope everyone has a lot of fun, but that's I think, hearing out from an expert, the 3 top tips, everyone, keep those in mind for when you're building your habitats. Robin, just before I let you go, can you please pick a number between 1 and 131?
How about 63?
Let's have a look. I hope you have all enjoyed having Robin on today. I've had an absolutely fantastic time. The questions that you were all asking were brilliant today, by the way, but we do have a winner. It is Milan Boons. So congratulations, you have won a koala plushie. Please send an email to community@frontier.co.uk with your address so that we can send it to you. But please keep in mind that obviously we are in unprecedented times and it will take a while for the koala to get to you. Just keep that in mind. But congratulations, Milan Boons, and thank you so much for joining me today, Robin. This has been an absolutely brilliant stream. I think I can speak for the chat when I say they've all had a great time.
Well,
Gareth says,
thank you very much, Ante.
Thank you. Gareth says, thank you so much. It was very interesting. Heather says, this has been great. Lorenzo says, congratulations to Milan. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, this has been fantastic. So I hope you have a good rest of your day. I guess it's morning there for you.
Yes, it is. And thank you for all your questions. They were incredibly insightful. And I hope that everybody really enjoys getting into designing those environments.
I mean, I'm hoping that when a new generation of habitat architects come through, that they will cite that Planet Zoo was the thing that got them into it. Fingers crossed, but we shall see. But thank you so much for joining, everyone. I hope you've had a great time today. Yes, I'm seeing everyone's saying goodbye now. I mean, I hope we get to do another stream soon. But yeah, I think this has been a fantastic stream. And yes, I hope to see you all well, the next one. I don't know when it will be, but fingers crossed it'll be soon. But we're going to say goodbye now. So thanks for joining, Robin. Thanks for watching, everybody. And yeah, fingers crossed we'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Shante. Bye-bye.